Welcome to The Explainer. So glad you're joining us today. We are going to explore a really deeply moving piece of writing by Dr. Iffy, all about celebrating the quiet, profound, and, honestly, often invisible impact of fathers. We're going to break down what it actually means to father someone, looking past the obvious and into the heavy, beautiful responsibilities that shape human lives. Whether you're a parent yourself, a mentor, or just someone looking to understand the lasting legacy of the people who shaped you, there is something incredibly powerful in this material for you.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Beyond Biology, the Choice.
You know, we so often think of fatherhood as just a biological fact, right? But reading the author's personal reflection on her own dad, there's this incredibly grounding realization. She writes, he had a daughter who knew, without question, that she mattered. I mean, wow. True fatherhood isn't about fame or getting buildings named after you or giving these grand speeches. It's built in the absolute ordinary details of life. It's those everyday choices, those quiet sacrifices you only really understand years later that prove to a child their absolute worth.
Because at its core, fatherhood is a calling. It's this repeated, active decision to just show up. Sometimes it's the man who steps up for a child he literally didn't bring into the world. Or it's the mentor who looks at a young person, sees this tiny spark of potential that everybody else missed, and just keeps believing in them. That right there, that is the active daily choice of fatherhood.
So that brings us to Section 2, the 5 invisible responsibilities.
We've got presence, provision, protection, teaching, and emotional courage. These are the core duties of fatherhood. And let's be honest, they usually go completely unnoticed and unrewarded by the outside world. We're going to redefine what each of these actually means in practice, because the author takes these really common words and gives them incredible depth. Let's look at the first one. Presence. Now, we usually think of this as just being physically in the house, sitting on the couch. But the text redefines presence as something way more costly. Picture a man who's had a brutal, grueling day at work, carrying worries his kids will never, ever see. Presence is the exhausting choice to pause at the front door, take a breath, gather himself, and make a quiet decision not to pour the weight of the world into his home. It costs time, it costs energy, and sometimes pride just to be truly available for those small moments. Next up is provision. Naturally, our minds jump straight to money, paying the bills, putting a roof over the family's head. But provision goes so much deeper than that. A father provides reassurance. He provides stability. Honestly, sometimes provision just means carrying anxiety quietly so the kids don't have to. And perhaps most importantly, he provides an enduring belief in a child. When a dad equips a child with that kind of unshakable belief, that kid carries it into the classroom, into job interviews, into every tough decision they'll ever make. And that outlives any amount of money.
Then there's protection. This isn't just about making sure the doors are locked at night. It's about emotional protection. We're talking about protecting the actual atmosphere of the home. A father protects his kids when he manages his own anger. He protects them when he chooses his words carefully, making sure his kids never have to walk on eggshells or, study his mood before they feel safe enough to speak up. And the crazy thing is, when this is done perfectly, nothing dramatic happens, which is exactly why this immense effort is almost entirely invisible.
And all of this naturally builds into teaching. A father is a child's very first teacher, but not through formal sit-down lectures. Kids are always watching. They learn the patterns. A father teaches by how he handles his own disappointment. He teaches by how he speaks about people who aren't even in the room. And he teaches profoundly by whether he's willing to apologize when he messes up and how he bounces back from failure. Through all that, he is actively shaping what that child comes to believe about respect and their own self-worth. Which brings us to the fifth, and I'd argue maybe the most difficult responsibility, emotional courage. The text points out this really heartbreaking reality. So many men were raised to be completely silent about what hurts them. They were taught to just hold everything in. So they become fathers while still carrying that heavy silence. Breaking that generational pattern, actually showing children that strength and tenderness can exist in the exact same person, that requires absolutely monumental emotional courage.
Moving into Section 3, Acknowledging the Pain. We really need to pause here and validate a heavy reality. For a lot of people, the word father doesn't bring up warm, fuzzy feelings. Instead, it brings up grief over fathers who are absent, harsh, or even harmful. And let's be clear, no one is required to pretend the damage wasn't done. But healing can sometimes begin when we start to understand where a person's brokenness actually came from.
Some fathers failed simply because they were careless. We absolutely must acknowledge that painful reality of neglect. It happens, and it leaves a really profound mark.
But
Some failed because they themselves were deeply wounded. Many people can only parent from what they were given. A man who was never spoken to gently might literally not know how to reach for gentleness. A man who grew up thinking fear was the same thing as respect, well, he's probably going to pass that exact same confusion right on to his kids. Understanding this doesn't excuse the damage, not at all, but it does help us see the cycle.
So what's the path forward here? We have to stop allowing another person's unfinished story to become ours. Now, this isn't about rushing into forgiveness if it's not safe or even possible. It simply means that true healing starts when we separate our own identity from our earthly father's brokenness. You are totally allowed to feel what you feel and heal on your own timeline.
All right, Section 4, the original design.
Here, the text really elevates our understanding of fatherhood from just a human struggle to a universal blueprint. The author contrasts the painful or confusing pictures of earthly fatherhood with this concept of a father who is love. In a lot of faith traditions, God is understood as a father, not some distant, cold ruler, but a steady, patient, divine presence who waits, restores, and loves without demanding performance. And the vital takeaway here is this: the brokenness you might have experienced was a departure from that original design. It is not proof that such love doesn't exist.
And finally, Section 5, the legacy you build.
Let's bring this narrative back to a celebration. We're celebrating the biological fathers, the mentors, the single dads who are out there doing their absolute best with the grace they have. Fatherhood is one of the heaviest, most sacred responsibilities out there. And when it's done well, it's quiet. It doesn't ask for praise or a round of applause. But it leaves behind a child who walks into the world feeling steadier, knowing they are loved just because someone chose to consistently, imperfectly, show up. So, to every man who stayed, you built something that will absolutely outlast you.
Which leaves us with this final question to chew on. What is the legacy you are building today, and who are you thinking for theirs? Whether you're actively shaping the next generation right now, or you're the product of someone who stepped into the gap for you, that quiet love leaves a lingering sense of hope. Thank you so much for joining me today on This Explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll catch you next time.